We printed one earlier, but I don't know if you have one.
Okay, good evening, folks. I'd like to welcome you all to the regular meeting of the Trinity County Planning Commission, August 11th, 2022. If you'll all join me for the pledge, we'll get started. I have pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. This time I'd like to open the floor to public comment. During the public comment period, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. This time I'll open it to the floor. Please state your name for the record.
John Brower from Junction City. I'd like to take this opportunity to comment on the discussion item on tonight's agenda. I don't know if you're planning on taking public comment on the Planning Commission schedule.
It has to be to do with anything not on the agenda tonight. So is there anything not on the agenda?
Will you be taking public comment on that discussion item?
I'm sure we will.
Okay, I'll wait till then.
Thanks, John.
Chris Williams, Weaverville. So I'm sad and I'm frustrated. 2 years ago, as of a couple weeks ago, I moved back to my hometown to work in commercial cannabis and to contribute to my community, our community, in meaningful ways. I've adopted 2 incredible dogs from the animal shelter, serve on several boards, teach improv, go on mountain adventures, have a terrific friend group, and I love, love, love my job and the clients that we serve. It's my job to keep on top of the local and state regulations in order to guide clients into compliance. And I thought it would be easy. There's a law, and then there's a pathway to meet that law, those conditions. But since I've moved here, I've watched the county slowly drive the cannabis economy into a painful memory. It seems that the ordinances that people fought so hard to shape, the small farms that jump through every conceivable hoop to get into compliance, despite being treated like second-class citizens, are done in what? For what? Going bankrupt, to line someone else's pockets, to be mocked, to be invisible. Now this industry appears to be dying a slow, painful death, and it feels like the planning commissioners and board of supervisors are keeping the life preservers and rescue boats to themselves. So I ask you for your help. Please raise the bar of accountability and stop being okay with the status quo. Be change makers. Find sound land uses for your policies. Stop accepting the finger pointing from county employees and ask for something better. 1 license has been noticed in the paper in a month. Cultivators waiting for their Appendix Cs to process and for the county to review their files are jumping through ridiculous hoops that seem punitive. Multiple completeness reviews, debating over building permits that are not even related to their cultivation. Without licenses being issued, people can't feed their families, they can't feed their dogs, they can't pay their bills or their employees. Without licenses, I'm out of a job. Hundreds of people are losing their jobs or are already out of their job. I may be new to the industry, but I'm not going to let it go down without a fight. And so I please ask you humbly to join this fight. Whether or not you like commercial cannabis can't really be a reason. It's Trinity County's largest employer. And I just beg for your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else on the floor with a comment?
Eric Keys, Weaverville, from Trinity Valley Engineers. I have a paper to pass out real quick. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm not going to bore you with reading it. It's just a letter addressing a application that was submitted in 2017 that we're still trying to get approved. There's been some issues, some setbacks, time extensions, expiration of the application. And all we're asking is that this item get agendized. It's for a subdivision in Higham Palm, P-17-21 and P-17-36. And we would just really like to have a discussion about what to do to move forward with this project. because it's stalled out and at this point it's technically expired. And the applicant has been more than willing to push this project, wants to get it done. And we've even submitted the post subdivision modification request that was never agendized. That was submitted last year before the expiration. So yeah, we just ask that this get discussed at some point, maybe agendized or a private meeting or something to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Eric. Is there any other comments in the room? Is there anybody on Zoom? Okay. With that, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment and move on to item 1. Item 1 is to approve the minutes from the meeting from April 28th, 2022 and June 9th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Make a motion.
Have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Item 2 on the agenda is a variance request to reduce the required 10-foot front yard setback and reduce the 9-foot by 20-foot parking space size requirement. In addition, a variance request from the design standards outlined in Trinity County Code Section 17.30.110. The proposed project is located in the Highway Commercial H-C Zone District. The proposed project is located at 900 Main Street, Weaverville. APN 002-072-032. Applicant, Weaverville Gas, Planner S. Fisher. This time I'd like to turn it over to staff.
Isn't this gas station that Redwood one? So this is the one that is right behind it that we're dealing with.
It is the beacon.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Planning Commission Chair and fellow commissioners, and thank you for attendance in the audience and members of the public on Zoom. I'm going to spend the next few minutes discussing item number 2, which is a variance request, VAR-22-01. This request was submitted by Weaverville Gas and was prompted by their remodel of their site. They're planning to essentially demolish most of the site and then redevelop it. And the variance request includes reducing the front yard setback requirement, reducing the width of the parking spaces. And the original request was to grant a variance of the design standards for service stations. But with our variance standards in our code in 17.32, we can't necessarily grant variances to structures design standards, but there is ambiguity in what the definition of a service station is. So since there isn't really consensus, staff decided to bring it to the Planning Commission to make a determination on the ambiguity of a service station. So we're going to go through that. And also we're using PowerPoints. So if there's a little bit of clunkiness, I apologize, but we're hoping that this can help be a visual aid to better understand the project. So without further ado, I got my little.
One moment, Skylar.
Yeah.
You made a comment that you were reducing the width. I think it's the length you're reducing in the variance?
And that would be of the parking spaces.
Correct.
So it's usually about 20 feet.
No, I get that. You made a comment saying that you were reducing the width. I think it's the length that you're reducing.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So to start off, the parcel is zoned highway commercial and is surrounded by other highway commercial and commercial properties. In the back, there are some residential properties, but surrounding the parcel totally are about commercial and then around the same area, some residential parcels. Going on from here, so to further clarify on the variance requests, the first request, and we have some diagrams that were prepared by the applicant's agent TVCE, which illustrates that they are hoping to reduce the typically required 10-foot setback for the front yard in the highway commercial district to about roughly 5 feet. And that would be a variance of section 17.22.070. So that's the first variance request. The second variance request is going to be, as Chair Sharp stated, reduction of the length of the parking space. So the only guidance that we really have for parking in our zoning ordinance is the off-street parking standards, and then a definition of parking spaces found in our definitions, which is in 17.10. And so that clarifies that all parking spaces in the county need to be 9 feet by 20 feet. And so the applicant is requesting that length be minimized to 18 feet. And then they're going to broaden the width of the parking space to 10 feet in order to compensate for that. So as we do with all variances, we need to run through our variance checklist that is outlined in our code. So the first item is, does this grant a special privilege that wouldn't otherwise be granted to other property owners? And so what we really look at for this is to make sure that this would be based on issues such as size, topography, or the shape of the parcel. So the applicant has made a case that due to the small size of the parcel and in order to have a competitive business, so that would be a retail store and a gas station with 4 pumps, this is the most optimal layout to have to meet the parking space requirement that they need to meet by code, and then also be able to have both the retail store and the gas pumps. So we find that due to the size that there wouldn't be a special privilege granted in granting these 2 variances. Okay, so the second criteria that we go off of is whether or not a use variance is granted. So we don't want to, for example, allow somebody to do a use that wouldn't otherwise be permitted in their district. We only want to look at constraints to the size or height requirements or things along those lines, not use. And so even though there's a little bit of interpretation into what a service station is, regardless, a gas station is an allowed use with a retail store is an allowed use in the highway commercial district. So the granting of this variance wouldn't constitute of a use variance. And finally, the last 3, this would not be injurious to the public welfare nor to the adjacent properties. The main thing that we looked at is we wanted to make sure that there would still be circulation and flow on the property, that there wouldn't be any concern that the parking situation would cause any potential harm to people that would be using this service. In addition, we wanted to make sure that the setback would not cause any potential harm to Main Street or people on that right of way. So we'll go over it a little bit in a little while, but we did route this project to Caltrans, who submitted a comment, which was no comment. So they reviewed it internally and they said that they have no issue with the setback being smaller, I guess, from the Main Street. In addition, upon reviewing both the Weaverville Community Plan and our land use element of the general plan, we found that the granting of either of these variances wouldn't be in conflict with either of those documents. And finally, variances can't be granted in the RD1 overlay district, and this is not located in the RD1 overlay district. So it's consistent with these standards. So next, I want to go over the design standards determination. So what the applicant is asking for is, rather than having to abide by the service station design standards found in section 17.30.110, that they have similar gas stations as to the Chevron, the Valero, or Redwood Oil. So typically, these design standards state that all service stations have to have a pitched roof and have rustic or semi-rustic character. In addition to this, the roofing material has to be like wood, shakes, or like a similar material to kind of capture that rustic character on the service stations. So to kind of supplement on what the applicant is going for, I kind of attached what they submitted is the design that they were hoping for. They haven't decided on color yet. They said they were open to different colors potentially. But the big question is what I want to provide what staff's interpretation of what a service station is. So this is something that has definitely been bounced around a lot in the office. I even had a call with SHN today to have a discussion on it, what other jurisdictions say. And ultimately, there are several definitions. If like you did a Google search, for example, some state that it's a gas station, some state that it's a gas station with other services provided, such as maintenance or repairs. We did receive a comment from a member of the public who stated, we can't necessarily say that it's a repair station because in the same district, there's a repair station listed as a use with a conditional use permit. But on the other hand, in the same uses permitted within this district, it says service station and a convenience store with or without petroleum sales. So it's a little open to interpretation in that regard. And I've been combing through almost the entire zoning ordinance to try to find any other clarity to exactly what the intent of this provision was. And I discovered that within the parking section, there are specific requirements of service stations that there has to be like 3 parking spots for each working bay, which clarifies that service stations have working bays, which seems to be a very clear distinction. Like for this project, for example, we didn't use the service station parking requirements because there are no working bays. We use the commercial services requirements for parking spaces based on the retail location. But something that I definitely wanted to say before staff made the recommendation is that we understand that if the intent of the service station was to be for all gas stations, that means that it hasn't been followed up until this point, which is unfortunate, but that doesn't mean that we can't follow the zoning code now, right? So we need to make sure that we are at our best interpreting the zoning code and following that to a T. So I definitely wanted to say that. And whatever standards that we need to apply, it's the standards that we have now. I understand that like there's a lot of discussion about the general plan update and that our zoning ordinance is out of date as well. But we're working with what we got. So all of that being said, and to mull over, I suppose, staff recommends to the Planning Commission. Let me see, I lost my paper. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, before I do that, I wanted to show what all the comments were before you made your final decision. So it's not just me talking to you. So we did route it out to all of the agencies listed. I wanted to make the distinction. No comment means the agency submitted no comment, whereas no comment submitted means they didn't get back to us. The only comment we got was from the building department stating that they are going to need to have a building permit reviewed and approved by them before this can go forward. And so that's the considerations. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution PC-2022-10 and Exhibit A, the conditions of approval to adopt a California Environmental Quality Act determination of a general rule exemption, which is 15061B3, and to approve the requested variances to reduce the front yard setback to 5 feet and to allow parking spaces, which are 10 feet by 18 feet. In addition, to approve the determination that a service station standards do not apply to the proposed project as the proposed project does not qualify as a service station. Thank you so much, and I will answer any questions.
Is there any questions for staff from the board?
Yeah, I have a question, if I may, Chair. What constitutes rustic or semi-rustic character?
There isn't really a definition.
Because it seems like the metal build is like the neighboring gas station with the nice modern metal roof. Is that considered rustic?
Without a definition, it's kind of hard to say. When I was talking to the agent, they were talking about how they understand the intent and want to incorporate the rustic character because they understand that, you know, especially like the community of Weaverville really values our rustic character. But there's like a lot of constraints for them in regards to especially the roofing element of the requirement.
Oh yeah, I like the concept of having a rustic look. I just wanted to understand what that meant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions for staff? I do have one question. Is the right of way for Caltrans the same all the way through town? Is it 100-foot easement all the way through, 50-foot from center line?
No.
It is not. Do we know what that is?
I would have to look into that and then get back to you.
I know at my end of town where my business is, it's 50-foot from center line is their right of way. And so, I mean, there was a point to the question. I went out and measured the canopies on both these facilities. And right now they currently sit right about that 50-foot mark. So I would assume that that's probably why they're sitting there now, is because of that Caltrans easement and right of way, which would bring the next question is the setback that they're asking for. Does that mean that the structure stays where it's at? And I guess it's probably a question for the applicant. So I just wanted to know if you guys had clarification on that.
As far as where the structure is going to be, I'm not sure how much it's going to change its current position. According to the site plans that were provided to me, it doesn't look like the canopy is going to change all that much in its location.
Right. Okay. And then my next question would be sidewalk. You say you're reducing the setback on the sidewalk. I went and looked at the sidewalk, and the sidewalks along both of those gas stations aren't defined. If you look at the sidewalk across the street, it's 5 feet wide. In front of these facilities, both are about 10 feet wide, but they don't stay that way. They reduce down after they get past these. So it's more like parking lots. So are they measuring from the street edge 10 feet in or from the edge of sidewalk 10 feet in? It's not clear what your setback's based on.
We're hoping that the setback, we're requesting that the setback would be reduced to 5 feet from the property line.
So is that edge of street? I'll wait and ask the applicant. It's probably good questions for them. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Thank you for that. And the PowerPoint was amazing. Thank you.
I'm glad.
It's great. Very useful.
I don't know if this is helpful before I step down, but in the standards definition for the design, it does say including wood, brick, stone, or other feature to enhance the structure. So something to that effect.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. At this time, we'd like to hear from the applicant.
Eric Keys, Trinity Valley Consulting Engineers. I'm going to represent the owner.
Go ahead. Thank you.
To answer the question about the property line is it's not really in line with the sidewalk. It touches the sidewalk on like right at the back of the sidewalk on the east side. And it's like 6 or 8 inches away from the sidewalk on the west side. So you can effectively say it's right behind the sidewalk.
Okay. And so the setback would be from property line?
Property line, which is basically the back of the sidewalk.
Got you.
And I'd also like to point out that Caltrans required, as a condition of approving the building permit, they've required the applicant to tear up and replace the entire sidewalk, driveways, and gutter along that frontage improvement. So that will also all be replaced at the expense of the owner.
And is the proposed, the setback that they're changing on there, that is for the canopy, correct?
Just the canopy, correct.
Right. So how much does that move it from where it is now?
It moves it approximately 3 feet
Towards the street?
towards the street,
Okay.
which is more, if you look at the roof lines of the existing canopy and the redwood oil canopy, you can see the redwood oil canopy is out towards the street, slightly closer than the current canopy. And we're moving the proposed canopy to be exactly in line with the roof of that one, of the redwood oil, or Yes, the redwood oil canopy.
How did you determine that? Because I had a hard time with the tape measure figuring that.
We did a 3D scan of the whole thing. Our surveyors did a 3D scan of the entire site, and then we developed grading plans based on that. So if you want snapshots of the models, we can show you snapshots of the models or whatever you like.
Do you know the easement for Caltrans?
The easement varies.
center line?
I have all their maps. It varies from mile marker to mile marker. It's not consistent through the county. It might be, and it's not consistent from center line either. It could be 30 feet on one side. It could be 80 feet on the other side.
Do you know what it is for your applicants?
Let me see if there's any dimensions on here. I am not sure off the top of my head, but it can be easily obtained with the maps that we have if you need it. Just not tonight.
No, and I'm not asking it for the need. I would suggest though that if the variance is within that easement, it's no point in having a variance.
It's not in the easement. It's the building would remain entirely on the parcel. Actually, it would still be 5 feet from the parcel line, which the parcel line is the right-of-way line for Caltrans. So we're not encroaching at all
Okay.
into Caltrans,
All right,
if that makes sense.
sort of. And I'm only going based on what I've experienced. So my parcel goes all the way to the street, but I can't build to the street. But their easement comes 50 feet from center line, and that's where I had to stop.
Approximately. It's the same with our,
Probably your building is the same.
it's the same. We were able to replace our parking pad to the Caltrans right of way, but we weren't able to replace the rest of it out to the street without an encroachment.
Right.
And in our instance down there, it's like 48.2 feet from center line or something. It's
Really?
not
So
exactly.
it does
50.
change everywhere.
Yes.
It's crazy. All right.
They have right-of-way markers all up and down Main Street. They're usually a little pin in the ground with a shiner on it, or they're an aluminum cap that says Caltrans right-of-way on it, and it's shown on their map so that surveyors can tie in. And I believe we tied into 2 or 3 of those when we surveyed this parcel.
Those are the dots on your map.
Potentially. I would have to see which page you're referring to. A lot of times we don't show all that on the map because this is a construction map. This isn't an exhibit to show how we surveyed it or anything like that.
I don't know. Thanks for answering my questions, Eric.
Any more questions?
Yeah, if I may, with regards to in alignment with the Redwood gas station, is that alignment of the viewscape, alignment with the distance from the road?
The alignment would be the roof overhang. So we're not talking about the pump aisles or islands. We're talking the overhang of the canopy. So our overhang of the canopy will be approximately 5 feet from the back of the property line. Well, that's what we're requesting. I think it's 5.2 feet. We'll just call it 5 feet. As surveyed, we've measured 5 feet from the redwood oil canopy overhang to their parcel line as well.
In alignment. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why we chose the 5 foot. And then it also gains us enough space to have our back out distance for the parking stalls on the parcel.
Yeah.
If we leave the canopy where it is, by code, we won't have enough back out space for those vehicles, and those parking spaces would have to be eliminated or removed, which means we wouldn't be able to provide enough parking for the retail store. So that's the cause, or the reason for the moving the building a couple of feet.
Understood. Is there any more questions for the applicant? Do you have any more?
I'm good.
All right.
I don't like to speak in public.
No, you did good. We appreciate your time. All right, at this time, is there anybody else that has comments in regards to this? On the floor? Please state your name for the record.
Evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Tom Belenko, Douglas City. I kind of laughed when I saw this project. I had a friend a few years ago when cannabis was first starting, and many of us licensees were comparing ourselves to owning a vineyard or owning a commercial farm or maybe some livestock. He said, really what you're doing is it's like you're running a gas station. You have to have full control of what comes in and what goes off your property. You have a bunch of regulatory agencies. So I can appreciate what the applicant goes through and also what planning has to do because there's many layers of regulation. We've got feds in here, we got the state in here. So this variance, and every one of them is a make or break. This one too, I think this is a well-reasoned staff report. I think it's accurate and I'm in favor of granting this variance. As regards Caltrans and their right-of-way, good point, a good question. I will only note that certainly this was circulated to Caltrans. They had no comment. Legally, I think that would put the applicant and the county in a fairly strong position where Caltrans would come back and say, hey, you crossed into our right-of-way. Well, we told you we were going to grant this variance. They had the opportunity to comment and they didn't. So I wouldn't use that even if the right-of-way did interfere with this variance. I wouldn't use that as any reason to deny this. Caltrans had the opportunity to comment and didn't. Otherwise, I think, I know the applicant, I think we all do. This is a family business. This is good for Trinity. The expansion is good. Somebody expanding in this economic climate is a great idea. So I'm in favor of it. I hope you grant this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments on the floor?
John Brower from Junction City. I would encourage the commission to approve this project as presented. No additional conditions or anything like that. It's another example of funny shaped parcels that we're trying to somehow live with in Trinity County. Variance seems appropriate in this case.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else on the floor? Is there anybody on Zoom? Okay, at this time, I'm going to close it to public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Commissioners, feel free.
So I have some kind of comments. So highway commercial zoning allows, first of all, I totally support the project. I think it's a great idea. And so my comments aren't objections. They're concerned about how variances are being implemented. So highway commercial zoning allows a convenience store with or without petroleum gas sales. I tried to look up the definition of convenience store. I looked at all the other zoning ordinances in the state where they define that. And this clearly fits into what we commonly think of as a convenience store because it's small in size. It has limited, merchandise. But it fits into the common sense definition of a convenience store with petroleum sales. I'm a little bit more skeptical about calling it an auto service station because as Ms. Fisher pointed out, there aren't any bays, there's no repair, there's no maintenance. And so I kind of feel like the applicant had been forced somehow past staff, obviously, had said you're a service station, you need to meet these design standards, and they're requesting for a variance from the design standards. Variances are supposed to be for some unique hardship related to the size, the shape, the topography of the parcel. So the first two variances for parking and for the canopy overhang, those make total sense. But issuing a variance because of a fuzzy definition, because it's not clear, because you're trying to clear up some ambiguity, that's not what really variances are supposed to be for.
Agreed.
So I have a suggestion, which would be to, and I can make this as a motion, that we adopt the resolution, essentially adopt the staff recommendation, but that the resolution be changed to say, finds that the proposed development is a convenience store with petroleum sales and therefore does not need to meet the design standards outlined in Trinity Code, County Code Section 173110. That kind of, to me, is a lot cleaner. It doesn't violate what the definition or what the state variant, when you can issue a variance is, as Ms. Fisher has pointed out, is defined by the state and repeated in the county code. And so we need to follow that definition. And by just saying what it obviously is, you know, calling whatever or whatever, it's a convenience store with petroleum sales.
Exactly right.
So it doesn't really need a variance from the design standards.
That's a good point. Is there any other comments, discussion? Rory?
Chair, Director Connell, I just want to clear something up. That was a suggestion, not a motion, correct, Commissioner?
I'd be glad to make it as a motion.
Just trying to get some clarity. I know that we're all trying to track down what's
Right.
being discussed here. So
Would it be
a little
better?
bit of
I could do that.
You could feel free to make a motion.
Okay. I recommend that we adopt draft resolution PC-2022-10 with modifications that I will clarify, and Exhibit A, conditions of approval. A, adopt a California Environmental Quality Act CEQA determination of a general rule exemption 15061, paragraph B, paragraph 3. Approve the requested variance to reduce the front yard setback to 5 feet and to allow parking spaces which are 10 feet by 18 feet. In addition, to approve the determination that service station standards do not apply to the proposed station, as the proposed project is a convenience store with petroleum gas sales. That would be a change.
Okay.
And then the resolution itself, on paragraph 3, I would delete not an auto service station and service station in the second line. And I would say finds that the proposed development is a convenience store with petroleum sales and therefore does not need to meet the design standards outlined in Trinity County Code Section 17.30.110.
I will second that. Just for discussion purposes, I'd like to see some information about what a,
Microphone, please.
I'll second that just for discussion purposes.
Okay.
I'd sure like to just have some clarity on what the zoning requirements for a convenience store would be. And if this project falls within the realm of the convenience store without further adjustments.
So highway commercial does allow a convenience store with or without petroleum sales. The current county codes don't define either convenience store or auto service station. So as I said, I did try to look at convenience store definitions by other jurisdictions.
17.22-20.
I can read. For example, Campbell, California. Convenience stores means an establishment that includes the retail sale of food, beverages, and small personal convenience items, primarily for off-premises consumption, and typically found in establishment with long or late hours of operation and in a relatively small building. These stores can be part of a gasoline station or an independent facility. And I can keep going on. I looked at San Ramon, San Leandro, Loomis. They're basically small stores, limited merchandise, potentially longer hours, and they can or can't include gas. And I think that's what most people common sense think of as a convenience store. You zip in, you get your gas, you get your ice cream, you're set.
I had one question on the parking space being 18 foot. And where does that, I know that's our county code. I did read a comment that Redding's is different. And is Redding's in fact 18? Staff answer that, or maybe the applicant.
Yes, Reading does allow for an 18-foot, and the building code also allows for an 18-foot. And the building code defines a standard space as 8 feet by 18 feet, and a compact space is 16 feet by 8 feet wide. So even with what we're proposing, it's still bigger than the minimum required by the building code.
So the building code in Trinity,
And the state building code, sorry.
okay, so the let me get this right. The 9 by 20, the
9 by 20 is required by Trinity County Code,
gotcha,
which is a bigger space than both Reading and
state,
the state California Building Code.
understood. And is that for all commercial businesses?
Correct.
Thank you.
And the reason we widened it to 10 feet is because the city of Reading has this little sliding scale. If you shorten parking stalls, you widen them to allow for sooner turning when you're backing out.
Mhm.
So that's the reason we widened it, is to compensate for that 18 foot, even though 18 foot is more than adequate by most standards.
Makes sense.
So we were just trying to give a little.
Total sense. Thanks for that clarification.
Sounds like something needs to be addressed in the general plan.
Something that we could look at for our general plan update.
Correct.
Definitions we need in the general plan. What's a convenience store and what's an auto service station? That would really have helped.
I have a question. Does changing it, as Commissioner Fall has suggested, does that cause any detrimental effect to the business owner, changing it in the planning to a convenience store? Is there any hurt passed on to the business owner?
We'll ask staff. Does it change anything if we're just calling it a convenience store with petroleum sales? And therefore, they don't need the variance from the design standards?
The change in classification from service station to convenience store with petroleum sales would only change whether or not we require the design standards, because the same setbacks and other requirements for the structure still apply.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Ms. Fisher. All right. Is there any other discussion? If not, we have a motion and we have a second. I would like to bring this to a vote. Can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Commissioner Sharp, how do you vote?
Aye.
5-0, motion passed. He gets his project.
Good luck with your project. The next item on the agenda is item 3, annual initial variance CCV-22-22, a request for a variance from the required 350-foot cannabis cultivation setback from a neighboring residential dwelling. Trinity County Code Section 17.43.050A 8. The project site is located at 310 Coffin Road, Lewiston, APN 025-180-010. Applicant Eduardo Fernandez, planner S. Fisher. This time I'd like to open it up to Ms. Fisher for comments.
Thank you again, Chair, Planning Commissioners, and members in the public in the audience and on Zoom. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about item 3, which is a commercial cannabis cultivation variance, CCV 22-22. This application was submitted by Mr. Eduardo Fernandez due to a metal building on his site used for cultivation being within the 350, or it is within a 350-foot setback from a residence on an adjoining parcel. So without further ado, I'll jump right in. So just like the last presentation, I kind of wanted to open with the zoning and general plan designations of the subject parcel and the surrounding parcels. So the project parcel is rural residential. There's kind of mixed zoning in the surrounding areas. There's some ag forest, unclassified, but predominantly some rural residential parcels. Similarly, the project parcel is also zoned rural residential, and there is some agricultural and resource general plan designated parcels in the surrounding areas. I'm gonna go this way. All right. So as I stated previously, the variance request is to reduce the 350-foot setback from one residential structure on an adjoining parcel. And this is in reference to Trinity County Code Section 17.43.050A8, which provides the guidelines for specifically the cannabis cultivation variances for small specialty and cottage licenses. So this is the metal building in question. So it is used for multiple cultivation purposes on the parcel. Predominantly, and I wrote this out so we can know all the uses, but I got a little, okay. So it's a 60 by 80 shop, and it has many uses for the business, which is agricultural, chemical, and pesticide storage. In addition, it is an admin hold and a processing area, which will eventually become a harvesting area. So this is the structure itself. One of our cannabis code compliance staff performed an inspection where the need for the variance was identified and cataloged in our system. And he took some pictures to document the variance. So this next picture was taken from like the front doorstep, let's say, from the metal shop. And if you look into the distance, that kind of orange roofing is that residential structure that the setback is requested from. It's about 215 feet from there to the building. It's really cool. Cannabis has this like light that they shine and it tells them how far away it is. And then we have another picture to kind of show the perspective, which I'm trying to bring up for you so you can kind of see, because it looks kind of squinting at it, but maybe not. Maybe we can't see it. Nope, we can't see it. All right, well, we'll move right into the variance criteria then. We won't even worry about it. So we use the same criteria for evaluating variances for both commercial cannabis operations and for like the variance requests that we just discussed. So the first question is of special privilege. And it's important for this project, as all variances, that we look at requirements such as if there is an issue in the shape, the size, or the topography of the parcel. And so I used a topographic map and I kind of put the project parcel, and you can see the cultivation area on there to see where exactly it is. And we have some contour lines on the side of the parcel. It's kind of like on a hill side. And so the flat area there is what has already been. There are no trees there. So if he were to move to another area on the parcel, he would have to remove the trees. And if he were to go further on one side, it would be towards the floodplain. And if he were to go on the other, it would be up that hill. And then further along to the south, it would be closer to the BLM land. And so we actually received a comment from BLM when we circulated this because we notify the 300-foot setback, which I'll touch on in a little bit. So we find that given the topography and the existing location of the cultivation, This would have been the best location for him to put this metal structure so that he wouldn't have to remove any trees, he wouldn't be encroaching on the floodplain, and he wouldn't be developing on that hill. So the next thing that we look at is the use variance. So this project is located in the Lewiston opt-out expansion, which was established by Board of Supervisor Urgency Ordinance. But given the fact that Mr. Fernandez's business was already established before the urgency ordinance went into effect, it is a grandfathered use. And so I didn't want to modify this map at all, but if we can kind of see, like at the very bottom, kind of in the middle, you can kind of see him right there. And so given that he is a grandfathered use, and we permit continued grandfather uses that haven't like stopped for a period, I believe, of 1 year, then it is a use permitted on the parcel. Even if it's, we like to say, like if a use is non-conforming, like if it doesn't conform to the overlay, but it was established before the overlay, then it is an allowed use. So similarly, we don't believe that this will be injurious to the public welfare nor the adjacent properties. It is not adverse to the general or specific plans of the area. And in addition, it is not located in an RD1 overlay zone. And so we meet those criteria for authorizing a variance. Finally, similar to the last project, we circulated this to relevant agencies for comment. Similar to the last one, we didn't get a lot of comment back. We got more no comment than comments. But the Cannabis Division did submit comment based upon their site visit that they did on the property, where we got those photos stating that the applicant, when they visit the site, has been compliant, has been clean. In addition, this is one of the applicant's last steps in order to reach license issuance, because he has undergone the Appendix C process. His Appendix C is looking really good. It's finished with technical review. So the Cannabis Division wants to make sure that everything is good with the cannabis cultivation variances before they issue licenses. So that's why we're here. So they wanted to do that before they issued the license. And so we took this to the Planning Commission. And so with that, we did receive some comments on this project. One of which was in regards to whether or not this project was circulated. So we did receive several comments from the neighbors that were notified. I believe admin staff did get a call from one neighbor, and then we did get a comment from BLM, which is a perfect segue because they emailed us comment. And so their comment was a concern on the cultivation area encroaching upon BLM land. They wanted to make sure that there was very much a distinction, like that it wasn't straddling, public lands. But I believe that the cultivation area is as far away from the BLM property as possible, since it's that property to the south and they're cultivating on the northern part of the property. In addition, they made a comment about signage requirements. Regardless of their comment, part of the Appendix C process, separate than this variance, is that it's basically, because when I got this, I ran to cannabis environmental compliance, right? I'm like, okay, what does this mean? How do you handle this? And they said, the Appendix C document is great because it captures all of the requirements in the cannabis EIR in our ordinance, and then it makes sure that the cultivators abide by that, as well as incorporating site-specific mitigations as well. So if within the review of his Appendix C, if it's found necessary that there are additional conditions based upon BLM's comment, then that would be incorporated. But that would be separate than the variance, since that's just between that one resident and the cultivator. So those are all the comments that we received submitted to us on this project. So I would like to recommend as staff to the Planning Commission to make a motion to adopt Resolution PC-2022-11 and Exhibit A, Conditions of Approval, to first adopt a California Environmental Quality Act determination of a general rule exemption, which is Section 15061B3, and to additionally approve the requested cannabis cultivation variance to reduce the cultivation setback from 350 feet to 250 feet, 15 feet, excuse me, from the residence located on APN 025-180-038. Thank you, and I will answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Skylar. Is there any questions for staff from the commission?
I have a few. I'm just curious. So, you mail out the notifications to the adjacent landowners. How do you know if they received it? I mean, do we do return receipt requested or it seems to be a kind of something's not working here. And I'm just kind of curious, do we try to track whether or not someone actually received the notification?
Yeah, so first, where we get the addresses or the PO boxes most of the time, where we send those letters is from the assessors. So we don't use certified mail because per letter, that would bring us to $6+
$6 a piece.
Yeah, so because of that, we've developed this certificate of service policy in our office where every time we mail a letter out, we have whoever mailed out the letter sign out, hey, on this date, I mailed out all the letters and we have a copy of all of the addresses that we mailed to. And that's our way of kind of tracking based upon the mailing address associated with this parcel recorded with the assessors and with the signature of our staff. Then that's how we track who gets mail and when.
Okay. So I understand it's expensive to actually figure out if someone actually got the letter. That's the issue. Yeah. So was the sheriff's department had past kind of issues with this property, as far as I understand it. Were they asked for comments, or do you normally not ask them? But since they have some knowledge of this property, I was just curious if they were asked for comments.
We only asked the cannabis division for comments since they had gone out to the property. They were in the program.
Okay. I'm getting the feeling that somehow, so variances are for property, it's some unique hardship that's associated with the size, the shape, the topography of the property. So last meeting, that flag property where they wanted to put in, where they had their cultivation area was too close. It's because there's no other way on a really skinny piece of property that they could meet that setback. It was brought up, though, that you didn't want to have them, the planning department didn't want to have them cut trees. And I'm a little concerned that somehow cutting trees is creeping into whether or not someone qualifies for a variance. And so, because I cut a bunch of trees to build my house. I think a lot of people around here cut trees every day. And so am I misinterpreting that? Is there somewhere where tree cutting is a qualification for a variance?
If I may, through the chair, and sorry, Skylar, I don't want to step on your toes here. So cannabis variances are vastly different than everywhere else in our county code. That's why it was installed into the cannabis cultivation variance. That's what we're actually here for. There are restrictions for cannabis applicants on what trees they are allowed to cut. So if they're a listed commercial tree, they are not allowed to remove them from their parcel at all. And so that's why those two interfaces kind of connect in that way. And that's why, this project has been previously issued licenses. This building has been existing due to the nature of the transition in our staff. We actually identified it this year as needing the variance, which is why it's your first one and not a renewal. Otherwise, this variance would have been issued when the first site inspections were done and noticed that building being within that required setback of 350 feet. Because the license was previously issued, we noticed it this year, and that's why this is before you.
But where is that in the ordinance that you can't cut a tree, in the ordinance itself?
Well, it's both. Excuse me, let me pull through it.
Because I'm looking at 1731.010, which is essentially the state definition of when you qualify for a variance. And you don't qualify for a variance for economic hardship or cost to the landowner. So where, I mean, I know you need a variance if you're within 350 feet of or not a residence, but where does it say you can't cut trees in order to accommodate that?
Were there any other questions while Sean finds that?
So if the landowner does not use the 60 by 80 shop for anything associated with cultivation, essentially he would need to exclude that from his definition of premises or the project area, and then he wouldn't need the variance.
If that shop was not used for cultivation purposes, then he would not need the variance, no, from that shop, no.
And then if he moved the shop to the south end of the project area, would he need to amend his Appendix C if he was going to add a shop further south?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually looking on Google Earth right now, and it would appear that the topography does not justify the variance. It's flat ground all the way up to his existing house with a pond. There's roads down both sides of that flat topography, and actually looks like a building site next to his existing greenhouses. So it doesn't look like anything with topography or even tree cutting for that matter prevented him from building it in a different location. Which lends to the question, what's the variance for if there's no hardship, even with or without the tree question. I mean, Google Earth is right here if anybody wants to look. It's pretty wide open, and it looks like it's already been deforested all the way up to his home, except for a few canopy trees around his house. Again, I'm not against licenses or any of this. I'm just not thinking that we're using variances in a proper manner, and they're there for a reason. And everybody could come and say, well, I need a variance because I put a shop in the wrong spot or didn't look at the code before I built it. And now I want to use it for something, so give me a variance. That doesn't qualify under the state's definition of variances. It needs to be a hardship, much like the first applicant. They've got no other alternative. Their property is limited, it's constrained. That's the purpose of a variance. It's not just to make things workable for people that didn't put enough thought into where they built.
I have a point of view question.
There's a question.
Oh, I thought you were finished. You were asking a
Yeah,
question.
no, go ahead.
Oh. I think what we're failing to notice is, as we mentioned, the last applicant, we were concerned about the rustic feeling and, being part of the community. It's worth noting that this developer didn't clear cut this property. This property has been before us numerous times for various different issues. And he took the time to plan to put this where it matched aesthetically and efficiently with his business. He didn't come in and clear cut it. He didn't put it on a floodplain. He put it where it suited the business best. It's a 125-foot variance from a neighboring cannabis farm that has been licensed. It has a recommendation here that they are always in effect. Their Appendix C is current. Instead of making it more difficult for a dying industry, let's help the industry. We're
not here to help. We're just here to adjudicate. So we're just looking at what the law says.
I agree. I would commend him for trying to, minimize, kind of disturbances, but I am concerned that we're kind of giving away variances like candy where it doesn't really meet the definition. So it has to have a unique hardship because his or her particular parcel is different from others to which the regulations apply due to size, shape, or topography.
I'm going to interject
And
here.
that doesn't work.
I'm going to cut us off right there. Let's roll this back and get back on track with staff, and then we'll bring it back to us for comment because we're kind of getting into the comment section, not giving the applicant a chance to speak. So,
May I ask staff a comment before?
yes, you can.
So, what year was the building permit for that shop established, or when was that building built?
I would have to research and follow up on the exact year, but I know that it has been existing for at least a year or two.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that, staff. Is there any other questions for staff? And Sean, we'll come back to you on the tree question. Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Fisher, at this time, we'd like to hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Chair Sharp, Commissioners. Lisa Wright with Flora. We're an authorized agent for Mr. Fernandez. First, I would just like to comment that there was a letter of support from the neighboring parcel, the affected dwelling. In the past, the precedent that the Planning Commission has set is that if the affected neighbor supports the project, you adopt the variance. So just a comment on that. And the reason it didn't make it into the staff report was there was a question over whether that comment could be from a non-landowner. I do have this. Let me give this to you real quick. And it's actually the resident that signed the original letter of support, Patrick McNamara. He is the husband of I guess it would be the owner's daughter, right? So it's a family-owned property. And Natalie, his wife, and Patrick, they have power of attorney over that property. So I had never seen that you required the letter from the landowner, just the resident. So we have both now, right? That they have no objection to that. They're also a soon-to-be licensed cannabis farm. They have been in the program for a number of years, going through their Appendix C review as well. So I will note that this has been through the Appendix C environmental document review and found to be in compliance with our EIR. And that addresses the biological measures, the resources that might be affected, things that you've already brought up about topography, about trees, et cetera, from their biological assessment, as well as cultural resources. Now, this was originally constructed in 2018, prior to the NOP, the Notice of Preparation of the EIR. And there was some land transfer and ownership that was going on at that time with the license, which is kind of, I think, what contributed to it not being identified. However, it's not cultivation. And I believe if we look at the code, the variance requirement is actually from cultivation. So there are activities associated. You're shaking your head. I don't know. Maybe we could pull the code up. It's from cultivation. And so perhaps this variance wouldn't even be needed, but here we are with it before us. There's processing, which is a part of his business operations, but there's no actual cultivation. So the variance, if you look back in the history of the ordinance development, this variance was required for odor mitigation. The 350 feet distance was for that purpose. That 350 feet was kind of pulled out of the air, but it's stuck and it continues to be stuck. Additionally, within Appendix C's, when there is the potential for a sensitive receptor or a neighboring dwelling to be affected by the cultivation area, which emits the most odor, then odor control plans are developed as well. So should there become a problem, odor control plans. So oftentimes, especially in environments like this farmer where they're in enclosed greenhouses, and a processing facility would be tightly closed as well. There's air factors and dirt and bugs and such that you want to protect. So there's oftentimes charcoal filters and additional mitigation measures in place for odor. So I've kind of gotten away from the whole variance thing, but in terms of the purpose of it, it's really, was for odor control and mitigation. And it is required because of staff indicating that even though it's not cultivation, it's a processing harvest storage area, that they still wanted the variance, which may have also, resulted in it being delayed a couple of years. Well, since, that was 2018 when the building was first constructed. At that time, I think we'd go and measure, literally the inspectors would measure from the cultivation areas, not from storage buildings or processing areas. So the applicant is here as well. If you have questions specifically of him, certainly we agree with the staff's findings that this variance should be approved, and we urge you to do that forthwith. He's already been delayed in his season. His completeness review, I believe, is done with the Cannabis Division, as well as his site inspections have been completed. He's in full compliance with his Appendix C. A compliance letter has been issued by the reviewing consultants. This is literally the last step, and we can probably get this in the paper to be noticed next week. And we're really short on licenses right now. And although some of you have clearly been in opposition to cannabis as an industry, it is an important industry for our economy. And we urge you, please, to support industry and development and to approve this variance request tonight.
Thank you for that.
Do you have any questions or that I may answer, or the applicant?
Does the commission have any questions for the applicant or the representative?
Yeah, I'll ask. I had the same one that Duncan did. Do you know how long that building has been there?
It's been there since 2018.
That's when it was finished?
I believe so. Yes, 2018. But again, cultivation variance wasn't really from buildings at that time. And there was also an ownership transfer that was going on that may have delayed the observance.
Did he build the building?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. So he bought the property, but the license transfer took some time, right? So for that to show up on a renewal or in a site inspection, it took a little bit longer than just the building of the construction. And again, at that time, we were measuring from cultivation, and his cultivation is clearly quite a ways away from the dwelling.
So in chapter 1743, the definition of cultivation means the planting, growing, harvesting, drying, or processing of cannabis plants or any part thereof. So if he's processing in the building, he will be processing, then it would be considered cultivation.
What's the language in the actual variance portion of the code?
Well, I'm reading the definition of cultivation.
No, I
So
understand.
it says from
It's in the code.
cultivation.
Well, in the past, I'm just saying what has been practiced in the past, they would go to the garden and measure, right? So I think this is how it came up now, is that is also being considered now. Although it's a tightly enclosed building, the neighbor has no opposition with filtration and so on. Odor control plan, CEQA all complete, completeness check, everything. We're one step away from a business that is all in full compliance with no opposition from his neighbors. Please approve this variance, regardless of how you feel about cannabis. Do you have any other questions for me?
My question, the variance, the way this is reading is that the variance is for the metal building, but I see greenhouses behind the metal building.
That's the farmer. That's the other parcel, the other farmer, because he lives next door to another farmer. So as you're looking in that picture towards the house, you'll see greenhouses first, but those aren't his greenhouses. His greenhouses are the other direction.
I get it. So he has greenhouses here, here, through here and here. Right. So this is the 350-foot setback. So that would mean the whole.
It's just the building that is well farther away from 350 feet back. It's just the building right here that is within that distance from the other guy's greenhouses and his residence.
So the green square that is around, are you looking at the map that we're looking at?
No.
Any chance?
I am not.
Can we get her a copy of that map, please?
Or maybe you can pull it up. Oh,
I think that's what
It's hard to see.
So the green square that is outlined looks like they've encompassed his entire operation. I'm looking at Google Earth in conjunction with the map that you have. And do you see what I'm saying?
yeah. So that little green dot, I believe, is the neighbor's dwelling.
No, and I'm actually talking about the green square that staff has gone all the way around his greenhouses and his hoop houses, and it looks like his plants. That looks like it's the entire operation that you're asking for a variance, or is it just the building? And if it's just the building, then why the green thing all the way around?
I think it's just to display the premises. We have to display the premises that contains all cultivation activity. And then they look for the one that's closest to that neighboring dwelling. And in this case, it's the metal building. Not to speak for staff, but I think that's,
So if I put a dot in the middle of that green square, it would seem to be the center of that buffer zone. Is that not right?
it goes from the edge, the closest cultivation activity.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the map and
Yeah, in other words, in the future, staff, if the building that we're having the variance from could be able to be seen, we can't see any details. We can see greenhouses maybe, but there's not one map that we can actually see the metal building itself and just for us to visualize it.
I think we may have submitted the premises maps, which more clearly delineate in our application, the different buildings.
so it's encompassing all this and then emanating out from the middle.
So it looks like to me too.
Is there any other questions for the applicant? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Is there any public comment from the floor?
Terry Mines, Junction City. I know you guys are really busy all the time. Like you actually got a huge schedule of projects that actually need to come up here that aren't irrelevant. And I know that I just heard a definition of cultivation that's clearly not the definition of cultivation. There is a definition of cultivation. It's in the state rules. And it does not include all these things that we're just including. Cultivation is actually a process of growing a plant. It's called cultivating. It's pretty defined. Understanding that this rule was actually built around my property and my license. It's actually my rule. My cultivation is 351 feet from my neighbor's house. So I know this rule very, very well and what it was all about. It was exactly about what Ms. Wright said about odor mitigation, and everyone came up with a 350-foot decision in this county a long time ago that that's what was going to do that. So I know you guys got more important stuff to do than waste your time on something that's irrelevant to this actual gentleman's position to get his license. It's not right. You guys, like Ms. Wright said, this gentleman needs a business. Our county is hurting. The industry itself will decide if we're successful or not, honestly. And it's a very tough industry and it's brutal, but you guys are all Americans. I'm serious, man. We're supposed to give a person a chance to have a life and a living and have a fair chance to work. This is just an agricultural crop. It's like broccoli. I know we've gotten a little bit hysterical in this county over it, but it's just a plant and nobody comes and steals it with guns anymore. It's not a big deal. It's disappearing quicker than any of us want, actually, because of business. No one's coming to build a new home somewhere. We don't need opt-out areas anymore. These are irrelevance. The industry has done what it's done. It's crushing everyone. I know it very well. I'm in it very seriously. Okay. We need to seriously try to help license the people that can get licensed. And please don't be an obstruction to this. Please help them. They're not going to probably be here that long, and they're your neighbors. It's called love, people. Love your neighbor. Don't hate on them.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that'd like to comment?
Hey, Eddie Fernandez, 3-ton coffin. I'm the applicant. So as far as you just saying it's about hardships, I bought that place in 2017 and adhered to all the rules that were laid before me. It didn't get transferred, the license, into my name till 2019 because I had to establish residency. So those are the rules. And I had many people come to my property, Leslie Hubbard, a lot of people, and they didn't want me to alter any land, and they didn't want me to cut any trees. So I literally went out of my way to invite the county and take into consideration what they thought would be the best. And I put that building up and they knew I was processing in it. It was on my maps from day one. So they never measured from there. So if it's something the county missed since 2018, that is a hardship. Now I'm here. This should have been, I should have had a variance since day one. So it's not my fault that this was missed. You know what I mean? So I've always done it right. It's always been on my maps is processing. They came and pulled from the greenhouses to the gentleman's point, and that's way past 350 feet. So I've always done what the county's asked me to do. And it is a hardship. I've been shut down a long time, just sitting, waiting, and my seek was done. And then obviously this came up. Hey, you're actually processing in here. And, you know, so again, something changed, and it's nothing I did. You know, like I said, I went out of my way to plan this out. I built that building with my own two hands. I literally put that up myself. I used to do construction since I was 18 years old. So, you know, the industry is collapsing. I've been shut down a long time. I've been struggling. The state has helped me waive some licenses and stuff. My state license has already been renewed. I'm literally the only thing holding me back is now this. And I've gone to the winery. I meet with my neighbors now. Everyone, we all get along. So I don't even know who would be opposed to this. Certainly not my main primary neighbor, Pat. My closest neighbor to that is across the creek from me, probably over 1,000 feet, and her and I get along great now, Crystal. So I don't know. I really feel I get it. And you don't want to set a precedent where you're just giving out variances, but mine's a unique situation that, again, I built this and had the county out plenty of times. So I labeled this as what I was doing. I didn't try to hide anything. I never, so it's like, if a mistake was made, now I'm to suffer and have to move my building. I can't afford to do that. Where am I going to dry my product? I can't. That would be devastating. I can't pay to build that building. What costs have gone up to now, and materials like that. How long would I be waiting to clear out more space? And again, I was told do not alter your land at all. And I just had BLM at my property, as a matter of fact, literally last week. And I have the emails. They just approved because I have a right of way to go onto BLM land for my diversion. And they were there with a scientist, and they just approved my diversion again and my LSA. Everything's been renewed. My water board, everything's great. So I literally just had Fish and Wildlife and BLM on my property maybe 2 weeks ago. So I'm kind of shocked that they commented, that they wanted people to talk in on it. But again, my neighbors and I get along. So as far as I'm understanding, me and Crystal text back and forth all the time. And she's been asking me, where are you at with your CEQA? What's going on with you? Why is this taking so long? So, I don't see how anyone else would be opposed to this and me trying to get back on track. So that's really it.
I had a question for you. Is your actual crop within the 350-foot variance?
Absolutely.
So it's outside of that?
Yes. It's 360 feet or 355.
Okay.
Like this gentleman mentioned, we built it based on that measurement. I remember specifically measuring with Cody Smith at the time was the cannabis inspector at the time. He's not anymore. This is going back to 2018.
Gotcha.
And I was one of the first annual licenses issued by the state. I was one of the first 3 because I had a categorical exemption at the time. And again, I would have got my CEQA a long time ago. My Appendix C, I was actually advised by the county not to for years. Don't do this. You're wasting your money. You have a CE. You have a categorical exemption. I would have done this years ago. And again, the whole variance thing, this wasn't missed on me. I laid out my property with advice from the county and specific inspectors, and I laid this out on my maps on my county applications for growing cannabis. So it's always been laid out that this building's used for this. So I don't know.
As part of your Appendix C, is it your expected anticipation to provide odor mitigation out of that building when you're drying?
We do have carbon filters in there, so we do provide odor mitigation during drying.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What was the size of that building again? Was it?
60 by 80.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah. We stayed under 5,000 square feet because I got quoted for like $150,000 for sprinklers for becoming a commercial size. I just couldn't afford that. So yeah, so I went below the 5,000, met what the county advised me. That if you go over 5,000, you're going to have to get sprinklers. And again, I got quoted 150,000. So I was actually wanting to go bigger than 5,000 for being able to process and do everything with comfort. So, and that pad was already built out and flattened. Like I didn't even flatten that pad. I literally, again, they're like, don't alter any dirt. The pad was already there, existing. When I bought it from the previous person, it was just a big flat pad. And again, with them saying, do not alter your ground, be sensitive to the environment, you're close to the creek. I said, okay, this is the best place for it. And again, I would have went for a variance then, like, so it's just unfortunate. I feel like that something was missed, and it is a hardship to me to be in this position that I am told I could have already been in the paper had this not been flagged. So I'm here. I've been waiting more months. My appendix C was approved like 2 months ago. I've been waiting to get in front of you guys. They told me it's the earliest I can get in. So it's like, here the season is blowing by, but I mean, it is what it is. I just, I'm doing everything that I've been asked to do. So.
Thanks for your comments, sir.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments from the floor?
Chris Williams, Weaverville. So this farm is an amazing example of what a good actor looks like in commercial cannabis. For the last few years, they've fostered a positive relationship with their neighbor. They've invited the Lewiston community to visit their site. They've been in compliance with state and local regs, and they've ran a farm that produces an agricultural product that could really make Trinity County proud. But hardship, talk about that. He's been waiting almost a year to have his business be fully operational. Imagine not being able to work for almost a year. And it's a unique and special circumstance that the request to have a variance came 4 years after he built the space. Before he did a CEQA document, put tens of thousands of dollars into that. If it was so against our ordinance and it was such a huge issue, this couple 100 feet, then the county should have called this out years ago, but it wasn't. And now right before his license is about to be noticed in the paper after he's been waiting for so long, we would even think about not approving it. Well, that's really disappointing. This is indeed a unique and special situation. The Appendix C for this project has been approved, and all that they should need for this license to be noticed is the approval of this variance. Please, please approve this variance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments from the floor?
John Brower from Junction City. I'm supportive of approving this variance. As presented, seems reasonable, if nothing else, but a little history on cannabis setbacks as the program evolved. There was originally 350-foot setbacks from neighboring permitted residential structure from mature plant canopy. In 2015, 2016, the first iteration of the ordinance, that was seen as the odor impact of the actual flowering plants. And this is all before there was a state program or Prop 64 was even put before the voters. As it evolved, it came to not just include mature plant canopy area, but also immature plant canopy area. And that was as that was defined and added to our local ordinance. A little later, the state came out with a definition for commercial cannabis cultivation that Commissioner Fall cited. Once the state went through temporary emergency regs and 3 or 4 different iterations of the regs before they became permanent. Once it did become permanent, that state definition also got included in our local ordinance. Today, I would guesstimate that it's about a third of total cannabis licenses in Trinity County require a variance. And as, which perhaps the setback is a little too short of a distance to really fit the common use. It could be reduced. But it's what the county's had to work with for a long time, and it's what we've really kind of built this thing around. And there's going to be instances of variances. And we started out with thousands of potential program applicants in 2015, 2016. At this point, we're down to roughly 350 or 400 folks that seem to be either have submitted Appendix Cs or in the process of developing them. that is a very, very small number in comparison to the 4 or 5 or 6,000 commercial operations that were hoped to be brought into compliance at that time. Out of that 350 or so, we've got what, 15, maybe, or 20 total licenses right now? It's less than 5%. It's less than 5% of state licensed businesses that have a current Trinity County
Thank you,
cannabis
John.
license.
Thank you for your comments.
Please approve this variance. Thank you.
Is there any other comments from the floor?
Marie Peterson, District 1. Since day one, we've been talking about this 350-foot setback between cultivation and neighboring residences. Up until recently, cultivation was actually growing cannabis. Now we have a definition of cultivation in our ordinance and our code that includes processing of cannabis. Like, get it together. How are we going to have processing licenses and cultivation licenses when processing is defined as cultivation? This is bizarre. This is a really nice facility. The property is super clean, super tight. It's been in the program for years. The neighbor is a cannabis farmer. The neighbor's in full support. It would actually create a unique hardship for this landowner to have to go and build a new facility like this somewhere else, cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars that he obviously probably doesn't have to do that with after waiting for years and depleting his resources trying to do everything right here. It's not really fair to suddenly change the rules again to make the bar higher. And now all of a sudden, all the buildings have to be 350 feet back from the neighbor's residence. Like, this is going to create a lot of problems in our program that we didn't have before. I also think that preventing the clearing and development of wild sites that are still providing habitat and ecosystem services on a property should be enough of a reason to give a variance. We live in Trinity County. We have a ton of unregulated development that's occurred for cannabis cultivation. It's still left unchecked. And then we have these people who are trying to fit into the existing footprint of the anthropogenic impacts that were on the property and telling them to go and clear a new site just to build a new shop when there's already a very nice facility. It's not good land management. We also have a no net loss of oak woodland policy in California. So if there's oak trees, it could be 10 to 15% oak canopy and be considered an oak woodland. Then that landowner would be breaking the rules via CEQA and have to mitigate for that impact as well. Also, I thought it was a little bit concerning that it appeared that on the map, the premises may have been buffered out rather than individual cultivation centers, which now include processing activities. So just want to make sure in the future that the buffer would actually be from like cultivation sites, not the premises, because a premises is an imaginary box that's drawn. So that's really not fair to buffer it like that.
Thank you, Marie.
I just urge you guys to vote to pass this variance and do what's right for this failing.
Thank you for your comments.
Evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Tom Belenko, Douglas City. I'm in favor of this variance. I think it's one of the awkward situations where the rules, the ordinance says we need a variance, the facts on the ground. Does one licensed cultivator need some special permission and not be impacted by their neighbor? No, not really. The neighbor's own cultivation is closer to their house than anything happening on this neighboring parcel. So I know in previous instances where variances came before the commission, one of the concerns was, well, this variance goes with it forever. So maybe the neighbor now has no problem, but it could get sold. Keep in mind that cannabis variances are annual variances, even though it's a director's, it will shift to a director's use variance. It's still something that gets renewed annually. So even if this neighboring parcel, which is itself a cannabis farm, were to sell to somebody who's offended by it, we would have a process to deal with that later. So I think now, when you balance what would be, if only looking at financial impacts, but including other environmental impacts, I know cutting trees is necessary for building buildings and it's important. And, you know, maybe there are too many trees. I don't know. Clearing around buildings is definitely a good idea. At the same time, there are ecosystem services that these trees fulfill. And this is somewhat natural habitat there. Yes, there's a lot of clearing, but we've got BLM land on that southern border. Moving further into that, you know, if we don't have to, we don't have to. Balancing that against the potential impacts. A neighbor who doesn't care, wrote in, don't care, licensing in the program. There's not an impact. There is not a nuisance from this steel building. So anyway, I think this is easier than it sounds, and I hope you vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name is Melissa Matrevsky from Weaverville. I just have a short comment to make. I looked up the state definition of cultivation, and cultivation means any activity involving planting, growing, harvesting, drying, curing, grading, or trimming of cannabis. Just to let you know.
Thank you for that. Is there any other comments from the floor? Is there any comments on Zoom?
LM.
Good evening, Chair Sharp. Liz McIntosh from Junction City. When this program started, it was all about community input and not invading neighbors. And of course, we were amidst the green rush. And many of us in the cannabis community felt that there were better tools than the usage of a variance. But again, we were told that it was all about allowing neighbors to have a voice, and we supported that. The cannabis variance definitely differs from a regular variance because a regular variance is not annual, but for the life of the project. And again, making it annual was to continuously allow for neighbors to have input if things were to go awry. However, I'd argue that any passage of a variance does set a precedence, and it seems as though we're continuously trying to change our definitions and procedures midstream. And to me, that feels like we're opening our county yet again to possible litigation. I was the applicant on the 4th license issued in this county, and our farm was the very first approved variance. We didn't have a letter in support from our neighbors. We didn't have anything like that. And yet somehow that's a thing now. I think it would behoove our commission to verse themselves on all of the other variants this county has passed. The green rush is over. We're fighting over a carcass of an industry. And as long as this applicant isn't far outside of the realm of prior variances passed and there's no one in opposition, I would urge you to pass it. Nickel and diming these folks who've been here for years and jumped through every stupid hoop presented is, in my opinion, immoral. I know your job isn't to promote business, but it certainly isn't to create more unnecessary red tape that isn't applied to any other business in our county. The whole intent of this program was to bring people from the black market into the light, but instead we seem to be playing whack-a-mole. You popped your head up, so now we're going to punish you for the ills of the illicit market. And I beg you, stop the madness. Approve this variance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments on Zoom?
Adrian Keys.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Adrian Keys from Hayfork. I also would like to speak in favor of this variance. I think that as far as setting precedent goes, not passing this variance would be setting a precedence that would be extremely impactful on a lot of folks. And keeping in mind that these projects, especially variance renewals, have been they were accepted over the course of many years, and that's been the precedent set. I've never, and I'm telling you, I've maybe missed 2 or 3 planning commission meetings since 2015. And I've gone through probably every single variance that this county has ever passed in cannabis. I've never seen a structure, a building included in a variance. It's the canopy is what it's always been measured. And if this is what was measured for this site, and everything was compliant when that permit was issued, I gotta wonder if the county is ready to accept the liability for that, because that's just beyond the pale. I'm not certain if this one is the case, but if it is, this is also a problem. Once a 3-acre conversion or less than 3-acre conversion exemption has been performed on a property, you cannot do another one. So again, I'm not saying I don't know this property well enough to speak to it specifically, but it's entirely possible that he literally cannot move his building. And, you know, also through all these meetings, something I've seen, certainly, a lot of them in the opt-out hearings, comments are regularly accepted from non-owners. There was a significant number of renters whose comments were never once doubted by any commission or board in the opt-out hearing. So I think that's a facetious comment. His Appendix C has been approved. There are odor mitigations required if complaints are received. At that point, an odor mitigation plan is required to be implemented there. And kind of like the previous variance, but it turned out to really not need a variance, right? I think that's where we are with this one. And I appreciate that conversation and seeing a commission work towards finding a solution that ultimately is more simple. It's entirely possible, and I believe it may even be included in the state law around variances, is that regulations, the local jurisdictional regulations that create ordinances and create these types of setbacks and whatnot, can themselves be seen as overly zealous. And that, you know, you like, for instance, the acre cultivation with a minimum of a 50-acre parcel. Well, we know that a 640-acre parcel still required a variance for an acre. So it could be the regulations themselves don't fit what's on the ground, not so much.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments on Zoom?
Lori Wills.
Hi, this is Lori Wills from Lewiston, and I am one of the applicant's neighbors. And obviously, we live in the opt-out. I'm not going to encourage you one way or the other. I just wanted to voice some concerns about information in the staff report. And first of all, it doesn't appear that this variance request, in my opinion, qualifies for unique hardship, and there's been a lot of discussion about that already tonight. But I don't know, it just seems that the applicant can make the necessary adjustments without the variance. Also, the staff report clearly states a variance must not be injurious to the public welfare nor to the adjacent properties. And this CCL is across the creek from the local vineyard that was established in 1998. And they added a winery and a tasting room in 2006. So this has been a public gathering place for wine tasting, weddings, celebrations of life, and other private and public events for 16 years. And to clarify, 13 years since Eddie has owned the property. I really encourage you to give consideration to the impacts this commercial cannabis operation is having on the public's welfare and adjacent properties. His site has been the source of dozens and dozens of nuisance complaints that include odor, noise, light blight, and direct sight of the greenhouses and hoop houses the public can see clearly from the winery. Additionally, code enforcement has been at this site. I don't know whether or not those issues have been resolved. When one business that is not open to the public has such an adverse impact on a neighboring business that does serve the public, I don't understand how this is not considered injurious to the public welfare and adjacent properties. You know, I'm nothing against Daddy, and I'm sorry I'm the only one that seems to be raising concerns. You know, I do hope he can make it through the process, but I just want the commission to give consideration to the neighbors' concerns, that in doing so, as he works through this variance request and the Appendix C, that everything is being done properly going forward.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments on Zoom? Okay, at this time, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. I'm going to close the public comment portion of this, and when we get back, we will bring it back to the commission for discussion. The 10-minute break will reconvene at 7:55.
Okay, just forget other hands.
reconvene. If everybody would come on in and join us. I do not know.
Restroom.
Where is Sean?
I thought they just walked in.
Yeah, he was done before us.
Yeah, both of them. Okay, we're going to go ahead and bring this item back to the commission for discussion. So commissioners, feel free to open up. Okay, I'll go. One comment was, and this is my big concern with cannabis variances, is if the property adjacent to it that we're offering a variance to changes hands to somebody else that is opposed to it in the future, and this is a director's use permit, what is the mechanism for the said person that may or may not buy the property adjacent to actually get a hold of the cannabis division and go, hey, we don't want it within 350 of us? What would that process look like?
So every year we would be recirculating the notice of the variance at the director's level versus the planning commission level. So it would be noticed to neighboring parcels 350 feet from the project site.
Okay.
They would have an opportunity to make comment.
Okay. And isn't that very similar to what has already been done to these people? Basically setting them up for failure?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, Commissioner.
Well, if you're allowing somebody to do, to invest and spend money, put a building in, give them a variance, and there's a reason that variances are what they are in the state description, because they're problematic. If you allow this with a variance and you say it's okay now, but you say, well, if the property next to it changes hands, and they can come back and protest that. And according to what we've all been saying here, if somebody has a problem with it, then it's a problem. If nobody has a problem with it, then it's not a problem. So now the owner of the property with the variance goes back to the, having somebody that doesn't want the thing within 350 feet of them, complains to you about it. They want the variance removed. The owner of the property has already invested potentially tens of thousands of dollars into his build and his business. Now all of a sudden he's got to fight again. And it just seems like we're setting, up another issue in the future for us, or at least setting the stage for one. And and so I'm wanting everybody to consider that, because it seems to be, well, if somebody changes hands, they can complain about it, and then maybe that variance goes away. And then he's left holding the bag once again because the county made a way for people to not be okay with what's going on. And it goes right back to what he said earlier about the county not complaining or saying anything to him when he built the building. Why was it, the building was obviously for his cannabis crop. It was obviously going to be used for processing. At what point did the county think it would be okay? And if the county owns that mistake and saying, well, this was just missed, which is what you guys kind of opened up with, is the county wanting to make the exception then and not the variance and say we made a mistake and this isn't a variance, but this should have been part of his original design. I mean, the whole thing seems like we're setting this guy up for failure. He's been set up for failure. And variance in general sets neighbor against neighbor at some point with the way they're designed right now in this cannabis deal. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm certainly all ears.
I'm not sure if I grab the question in there. I'm going to try and kind of say it back to you and make sure that I understand what you're saying. So at the director's level, if I receive comments on, let's say next year we notice this property next door has changed hands to a new person. They're not cultivators. They don't want anything to do with cannabis. And I get that comment back based on the comments received. I can elevate it back to this commission for you to be the deciding factor. However, I don't foresee that circumstance being the case considering the comments that we received today on this application. And I can't forecast that far into the future to know who would or would not purchase that property. That's why we have this process installed in our ordinance that gives people the right and the ability to reduce the setback from the neighboring residential structure. Correct. The county did miss this. This, as you've heard, this building has been in existence. I cannot tell you what happened before I got here. All I can tell you is that since I have been here, we have held the line on the code. What's in the code is what we hold ourselves accountable for. And when we discovered that this was within the setback, it triggered the requirement for a variance. This is how we are here today. I can't tell you what will happen in the future should a parcel change hands. Should the winery sell to a different person who is in favor of cannabis? It could be a whole different situation that we're talking about, but I don't have those resources in front of me and I'm not there yet. But that is the process that is established in the county, and that's what we'll follow here.
Well, my question would be, so it seems like you're selectively enforcing parts of the code because the 1731, where it's talking about the criteria for a variance, it talks about there has to be some unique hardship and it's not due to economics or cost. The unique hardship has to be due to the property size, the shape, or the topography. And none of those criteria seem to preclude the building being located in another place. I know that that's really expensive, but that's not in the statutory language that allows a variance. So how are you selectively saying it's okay to have this as a variance?
I would just like to stop right there. I'm not selectively saying anything. I'm reading the ordinance. And 1743, which is our cannabis cultivation ordinance, entitles applicants to a variance from the residential setback of 350 feet. It does not say that the variance must be in conjunction with Trinity County Code 17.4 for variances. It establishes a variance reduction from a residential adjacent parcel. That's how it's written in 17.4.3 of the Cannabis Ordinance. It does not reference the variance to the variance ordinance. This is a variance for cannabis reduction from the neighboring dwelling unit on an adjacent parcel.
But then why does your staff go through all the criteria for what needs a variance if it doesn't apply?
You state the state code.
That's not my staff.
Okay.
It's a planning staff, and planning staff handles the planning code. I run the cannabis division, and I am in charge with the regulation of 17.4.3, which is the cannabis ordinance. In our cannabis ordinance, there's a variance that is written into this ordinance that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors that has been longstanding in the reduction of the setback from the neighboring dwelling unit.
Right.
It does not require that we do this, the variance in accordance with the variance code.
Oh, I would disagree. I was at all the public workshops when we were first developing the cultivation ordinance, and it was explained then that the variance code would apply.
No,
I would say-
I would disagree with
And-
that. I
and
was
if I-
there as well. And there is the variance, there's a variance as a mechanism for planning, but then the term variance is applied for a 350-foot setback that will be on an annual basis to get public input for existing farms. This was in the spirit of an existing industry, an existing legacy industry that the county and the people were wanting to bring forth. So there's a land use variance mechanism, and then there is the variance. It's tricky because it's the same name, but it's two different tools. And this 350-foot setback variance for the cannabis program is not the variance mechanism. That was based on that's what the ordinance has been, how we've been voting upon it for the last
Well,
5 years.
last meeting, we went through the same discussion with the parcel downriver on whether or not they would qualify for a variance. And staff went through the discussion of the size, shape, and topography of the parcel. And again, it was a flag parcel. It was long and skinny. They couldn't meet those variance requirements. So again, consistently, when we've looked at variances for cannabis licenses, these statutory criteria that are a definition of variance have been applied. That's exactly what we did last meeting.
Well, I have a point of view, if I may. Two things. I agree with Commissioner Sharp, and then I also want to acknowledge Director Connell's concerns with it. This was built before him. He didn't have any part in this, and the fact that it is.
He actually built the building.
No, it was, no.
I did not.
Director
Oh,
Connell.
Director Connell. I thought you were talking about the applicant.
No.
Sorry. It's like,
And it has passed EIR Appendix C and CEQA. And I think it has been acknowledged at this meeting today that through no fault of the property developer, the county, whoever it is, dropped the ball. I don't see how we can't just pass this, agree on this variance on that basis alone. I don't see how we can punish him or continue to deny him the ability to provide for his family on a 4-year built building that has been EIR, Appendix, and CEQA passed. I just don't see how we're ignoring the fact that it's been addressed for 4 years.
We could have them bulldoze the mountainside and then build a new building
okay, well,
to
that's
fit within the
okay.
variance.
Let's stick
I
to
think
what
that's the
actual ground conditions are.
I think
because
that's the
not what
alternative.
that's
would
not
be-
what the ground conditions show. There's the map.
Through the chair,
Go ahead.
Commissioner Fall, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here because you're referencing last planning commission with the medium acre setback, setback requirement. I think where we're getting a little lost in the weeds is we're talking about a small cannabis operation. The ordinance reads, and I'm going to read it verbatim, right? 17.43050 limitations on location to cultivate cannabis. Point 8, for specialty cottage, specialty and small licensed cultivation shall not be allowed within 350 feet of a residential structure on an adjoining parcel. For medium licenses, cultivation shall not be allowed within 500 feet of an adjacent property line. Those are the differences in the variances that we're talking about. We are talking about the setback of a residential structure on an adjoining parcel. The previous project that you're talking about is a setback from the property line.
But they both required a variance and the same
Correct.
criteria were applied.
Correct, but they're for two totally different things. This is a setback from the residential parcel, not from the property line.
I'm not,
Vastly different.
the setbacks aren't, I understand there's a difference, but both of them required a variance. And the criteria that were applied were the ones that were made in the PowerPoint presentation.
Correct.
And that is
Annual variance.
1731.
It's an annual variance under the Cannabis Ordinance. It requires to be reheard every year after. you
I
approve
understand
or
that
deny.
totally.
Yeah.
I understand that totally. I'm just saying the definition of variance that the staff has been applying has been 1731.
And it's in the application. So if the definition doesn't apply, then why use it?
So isn't this the weeds? Aren't we saying this is an existing business that has been in operation for years, that has a building that was approved by the planning department or the building department while there was a cannabis license? And it was in operation there was 4 years. It's been in existence with numerous staff staff visits. And so now what's come before us is, are we going to make this business owner move his building or not? Right? I mean, isn't this this is like kind of the bedrock of it?
No, I think the bedrock of it is
let me
we're
finish,
trying to.
please. This 60 by 80 foot building that's been in existence, now it's going to have to move. And so that is the reality. There's the weeds that we can deal with, but that is what is in front of us to determine what this business owner who is struggling is going to have to do with a neighbor and parcel that is also cultivating. that has no issues. So are we going to sit and talk all night about this? About the weeds of the different types of variances that we have been applying to this program for 4 or 5 years now? Or are we going to talk about what's in front of us?
I agree.
I don't think that, we're in the weeds. We're trying to follow the letter of the law in 17.31, which is what staff uses when they bring variances here. And in 1731, what they're calling out as a reason for a variance does not line up. So,
but the
we're
variance
not
is
making
to
code.
allow.
We're not bending code. We're not deciding what code should read. It is what the code reads.
But the variance for the cannabis program was to allow feedback from the neighbors, right? So there has been feedback from the neighbors.
The code does
Which
not
is-
say that.
Well, if you were here for the last 6 years throughout the process, that was the spirit of the variance process.
I get it, but if that was the spirit, then they should have written it in the code.
There, it is written in the code where there's a 350-foot setback. Letters go to all the property owners. Letters went to all the property owners and there was no negative feedback.
There was one negative feedback.
I'm talking about the property owners that are within 350 feet of that or the property. I believe the one opposition, was that opposition bordering or even within 350 or 500 feet of the cultivation zone?
So some of the adjacent property owners are feeling somewhat intimidated. I've gotten verbal comments. They're concerned about writing written comments.
Well, that's funny because I've spoken to some too, and they were quite happy to support it. So I think
there's both, right?
Right.
But if there's somebody that is not willing to write a letter or speak because of a perceived intimidation from a legal business, I'm sorry, but democracy doesn't work for the voiceless. It doesn't work for people that aren't willing to speak or write a letter. So the letters in front of us are in support. There's no letters in opposition to any of the property owners that are adjacent to this. So are we going to make this person move his project that has been in existence for 4 years and has passed for 4 years? Are we going to make him move it or not?
Correct. And then Skylar also made the point that if this wasn't cannabis industry, it would not be held to the same standard. And I just can't believe we're not telling this person, we're sorry you're here in front of us. This has already been noticed for 4 years. It has passed all inspection levels. The cannabis department has written a recommendation saying it is always clean and perfect. I can't believe we're not just apologizing to the landowner and saying, sorry, you had to come here.
Oh, sure. I wish there could be like a grandfathering because of the mistakes that were made so that this landowner does not have to have an annual variance. But that's not what we have in front of us. What we have before us is the initial annual variance. And I don't perceive this coming back before us.
But I think Commissioner Sharp had a valid point in that we're setting them up for failure. There has to be some type of provision to say, hey, look, as long as you match or you meet or exceed all guidelines, you shouldn't have to come back.
This is the pitfall of the variance.
Correct.
To begin with from the very beginning. And that is the risk that the cultivators take to do business in Trinity County. And that could definitely lead to blackmail, extortion. But that is not something that we can vote upon. The ordinance is before us. The spirit of it was that you better be a good neighbor, right? You better be a good neighbor. You better bring tomatoes to your neighbor and see what you can do to help, or else that person has certain power over your business. That was the threading of the needle that the Board of Supervisors thought was the right approach.
I would say the spirit of a variance is that when you plan and, when you do a business is that you try to make it fit within the parameters of that use. Which is why variances aren't handed out often. They aren't granted easily. and they aren't just used as a rubber stamp to get people's projects to conform. The idea and the spirit of the law is that people are building within that ordinance, and they're doing everything humanly possible to make that project come within those parameters and not just do it and hope and take a risk and hope that they don't invest and hope that somebody agrees with them on a commission that they need a variance. That is why variances are hard to get. That's why they're not doled out freely. And there's nowhere in our ordinance that it says, well, the spirit means this or that. It just says what a variance says in the state reg.
That's why this is an annual variance rather than the traditional approach to variances. Once you get a variance, that is I'm not sure if the terminology, not an entitlement, but it stays with the project. This cannabis variance is not like that. This is an annual variance every year. So the threshold is maybe less than a permanent variance that's with the project. That's why it's creates more work for staff and more risk for the applicant, but that's the risk they take.
Any other discussion? No? Do I have a motion?
I will make a motion. I motion for the Planning Commission to adopt draft resolution PC 2022-11 and Exhibit A of conditions of approval to A, adopt the California Environmental Quality Act CEQA determination of a general role exemption 15061 B3, and to approve the request for cultivation variance to reduce the cultivation setback from 350 feet to 215 feet from the residence located at APN 025-180-038.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
No.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharp, how do you vote?
No.
3-2 to approve the variance.
Good luck with your project. Okay, we're going to move on to discussion item 4, Planning Commission meeting time. Discuss and provide direction to staff regarding a proposed change in regular Planning Commission time. Staff, do you have anything on this?
Thank you, Planning Commission Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public in the audience and on Zoom. So I don't have a presentation for this one, but it does seem that we're a little split on changing the meeting times. So I believe for at least 2 commissioners, changing the times to any earlier than I believe 5 o'clock would be a little bit of a hardship. But there has been an interest in moving it to an even earlier time in the afternoon than that. So it is at the discretion of the Planning Commission to change the time, but it seems like the earliest to set the time that wouldn't preclude any of the commissioners or cause change in occupation, whether it's work or other commitments, would be 5 o'clock.
Thank you for that, Ms. Fisher. Is there any questions for staff? All right, this time I'd like to open it to public. Any public comment?
John Brower from Junction City, and the history, the practice in Trinity has always been to start planning commission meetings at a time when normal working folk and, pick up the kids from school, get them dinner, get back to town, or deal with kids, sports, or finish up your work day and get out of the woods and back to Weaverville. It just seems reasonable that that the commission prioritize the community service and I think the citizens of Trinity appreciate your volunteering for this board, donating your time, trying to make this place we all love a better place. But it's the citizens who are the real client here. They are the customer. They are who you are attempting to serve. And there's a public engagement component to Trinity County Planning Commissions that are important here. And it's a place for people to be heard and ideas to be shared and debated. And the public comment portion of a planning commission is very important to address items not on the commission. It's critical that be scheduled at a time of day where normal working folk can participate. And when I was a planning commissioner, a couple commissioners would be running in the door to make the 7 o'clock start, coming from far away or having put in a hard day of work. It just seems to me that it's already been adjusted from 7 p.m. back to 6. And I think it's reasonable to keep running with 6 o'clock or even take it back to 7 o'clock. The prior District 4 Planning Commissioner before myself was Tom McKnight. He volunteered for 29 and a half years before resigning. And he told me lots of stories about commission meetings going till 1, 2 a.m. And when I was commissioner early on in the development of the cannabis program, common for planning commission hearings to go past midnight. This is the venue for the citizens to sort through complex, multi-layered ideas in hopefully a respectful way. But you guys have to make some tough decisions, and it takes time to do it. And the public service needs to be the priority. So please be mindful that normal working folk, the history here is to do it in the evenings. And so normal people can participate. And as chair, you can end a planning commission meeting anytime you desire. If you feel like it's going late or you're getting low on energy, you can end the meeting and continue the other items on the agenda to a future meeting if you choose.
Thank you, John.
That might
Thanks
be
for your comments, John.
one way to deal with this.
Appreciate it. Any other public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Tom Belenko, Douglas City. Time, I'm not really too connected to, but I do think the evening is the right time, the right portion of the day for commission meetings, mostly because we do occasionally see things that come out like prepping an ordinance to move forward. That's important, but more often than not, we're dealing with things like we had tonight, a business, a property. And so it's already somebody's probably spending money, probably doing something to put this issue before you. So we ought not have them have to put their work aside also. And I think it does make it not so obvious now, a little bit easier for people to get here. Zoom has helped those things. I would say while we're at accessibility, maybe, I know with the general plan update, we're going to be doing scoping meetings. There've been some talk sometimes about doing like the planning commission dance where the meeting moves around the county a little bit. I'm sure Commissioner Heaton probably drives a long way to get here. We could have them not that Hay Fork is infinitely closer, but it's closer. Maybe we go downriver from time to time. The scoping meetings are going to be taking place in the various planning districts. So maybe we can coincide those with planning commission meetings, just, to open up the accessibility. It's a haul to get to Weaverville for some people. So I understand the question is about how do we make this more accessible? If I understand, I think that is the question. We might consider unmooring it from Weaverville. Obviously, it's easy. This is easy. We've got Zoom all set up. So I think that is viable. This is obviously the home meeting base, but occasionally sending it out there. But otherwise, I think keeping it in the evening, for me personally, seems like the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other public comment?
Okay. Chris Williams, Weaverville. So we really need more community involvement in local government because then you wouldn't hear from me so much. So the majority of community members like myself work during the day, and in an already rocky economy, having to take time off of our jobs to participate in local government is not feasible nor fair. The Board of Supervisors meetings meet during the day, but I do believe that Supervisor Cox during her campaign was all about BOS meetings being in the evening, which I would be a huge fan of. That would be amazing. I do realize and I empathize that it does make for longer days for county staff, and that some of the commission may only be at their best at 6 a.m., not 6 p.m. But I remind you, it's a privilege, or at least it should be, to represent our community at whatever hour it may be. And I really am thankful for your service. Furthermore, I also think this is a ridiculous item, that we should be discussing topics like what happens when a commissioner no longer resides in his district, or why does he keep calling code enforcement on neighbors that are waiting patiently for their cannabis cultivation licenses? I have a lot of questions, probably not a lot of answers, but please, I urge you to keep the current meeting time in order to just, in the very least, which should be the very most, to encourage more involvement from our community members. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Is there anybody on Zoom?
Liz McIntosh.
Well, she already said my name, from Junction City again. So I typically get up at 4:45 a.m. and I'm in bed by 9. I can totally appreciate the intent behind this whole discussion. However, I would urge you all to direct your staff to leave this idea in the discussion phase and abandon any real action to shift the meeting to any time during regular working hours. I truly believe that changing the meeting time in this way would serve as a tremendous disservice to all people in Trinity County, especially for working class families. Of course, echoing all the comments said before, but my understanding is that the Planning Commission's role is to provide citizen review and recommendations on planning related matters to the county BOS and vote on projects with meaningful public input. I love what John Brower just said. The public is the client. And with that said, are we doing what's best for our client if we make a shift like this? And though I'm totally sure that there's no time that's going to work perfect for everyone, I do think we have to err on a time that works best for the majority of our clients. Personally, I've attended more BOS meetings and PC meetings than I can count. And I've been told numerous times by our supervisors that the Planning Commission is the main forum for public input. One of the biggest complaints I've heard at BOS meetings, especially during controversial items, is the frustration from public that meetings are held during the workday. In fact, I've even seen where the really, really big meetings, the hundreds of people type meetings, the BOS has actually chosen to have those in the evening to address those concerns. I realize that we can give comment in written form, which I've done many times, but in my experience, written comments are rarely as impactful as being present in the room. And another concern I have is that changing this might have the potential to exclude most working class families from the opportunity to step up to volunteer for this role because they can't miss work to serve in this capacity. So not only would our voices be extremely hampered, but we may miss out on meaningful representation too. So especially as we move into the general plan process, I think it's critically important that the hardworking families of Trinity County have a seat at the table and a voice on the dais. Please don't change your meeting times. Thanks.
Is there any other comment on Zoom?
Veronica Kelly Albies.
Hi, Veronica Kelly Albies, Douglas City. Well, I had a whole speech, but Liz just gave it. So I will simply say ditto. And I do believe that it's important that the public has access to local government, and evenings are just more conducive to families and people being able to participate. So I won't bother you with any more other than to say I do believe it should stay in the evenings, and I hope you will consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments on Zoom?
Hayes Family Farm.
Hi, this is Steve Lyon, Junction City. Like Veronica and Liz, I pretty much agree with a lot of that. And I just wanted to add that I really appreciate the time that you as commissioners give to the planning of our county and to doing this right. And I know it's a burden on y'all sometimes to have to stay up some of these really long late night meetings. And I really appreciate that they're in the evening, especially folks coming from South County. Pretty much have to give up a whole day of work to attend Board of Supervisors meetings. If planning commissions meetings were also like that, it really starts to eat into being able to maintain a business, keep a job, stuff like that. So thank you for your time, though.
Thank you for your comments.
Lori Wills.
Hi, Lori Wills from Lewiston again. I just agree with all the other speakers and just wanted to say that thank you so much for your service. It's very much appreciated. And again, I agree. It's a better opportunity for the majority of the public to attend these meetings in the evenings. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments on Zoom?
David Albies.
Hi. Boy, talk about Liz McIntosh saying exactly what I was going to say. So I will not further the board's indulgence any longer. I just want to reiterate exactly what she said, and that's it.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments? Okay, at this time, I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to the commission for discussion. So I think we've heard the public's voice.
Yeah, I was going to say I've had comments, just people telling me they prefer in the evenings, and I'm fine with that. I just want to say if we stick with that, I really sympathize with staff, and I truly appreciate you guys, because I know it really, means long hours and long drives home and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
I would just agree with Carol, you're going to have a long day. So, yeah, I think it's important that we are available for the public. And if this is the time, I know it works in other counties. I don't know how well, maybe our process works better. I certainly am glad that people have the opportunity to give as much input as they can. I know I would want to if it was my issue. So, yeah.
And I did want to add too. I think it's a great idea that we move around the county periodically, especially down closer to where Todd is, so he doesn't have to drive as far. And especially when we get into the serious general plan stuff, I want to hear from everybody. I don't want to have people make them drive to Weaverville to chew on our ear.
Well, speaking along those lines, it was like, because I really appreciated Tom Blanco sharing that with us, because it's like, honestly, because of the distance of what my South County is, it was like we get zero representation here. And it's like, rarely does any of my constituents even come to the meeting just for the sheer distance, and everybody's working. And it was like, that's why probably we have zero representation, and we feel like we're totally neglected by the county. From absolutely anything and everything, we feel like we're lucky to get the scraps that are thrown out, and most of the time the scraps are moldy. And so, yeah, blue cheese, right, with the mold on it. But no, the truth of the matter is, it was like, I really appreciate it, but I will say this, that it was like, I think that the people do need to be heard. And as for myself, it was like I was talking over with my wife. I was like, should we do it earlier? And it was like, and she's like, well, you know what? for myself personally, yeah, sometimes I get home 1 o'clock in the morning and get to bed 2 o'clock in the morning, and Director Connell can probably verify and say amen to that. But the truth of the matter is, it's like, for me, it's like, this is just my day for this. And so I do my grocery shopping. I do everything I can beforehand. And then it's like, then I'm done. And so I kill multiple birds with one stone. So the time works well for me at this time, even though it's like, it puts me back at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like, I just make it work. And so that's kind of my take in the matter. It's like, I sleep in it just a little bit in the morning. So
I'd like to add that while the Board of Supervisors is a pretty much a full-time paid gig, this is predominantly a volunteer role, a prestigious volunteer role. And I really appreciate how this planning commission can be a wide spectrum of different facets of our community, right? Electricians and linemen and contractors and loggers and ministers. And I think that really enables a diverse spectrum of the community to have an opportunity to sit in this role of planning commission. My late cousin, Tom McKnight, who was here for many years, he was a logger, and he told me many times he'd be working on the Salmon River and would get off early and drive down here to, dust off the sawdust and run in here. And Dan Frazier, for 8 years, came from the South County, and now you're coming. And it really is a testament to the dedication of civic duties, and as well as the spectrum of diverse walks of life representing here. So just appreciation.
All right. Well, I think we're all good then with keeping the time as it is and continue on. I think we can close this discussion item. And we're going to move on now then to Planning Commission reports. Commissioners, do any of you have anything to report?
Just another thank you to staff. I pestered them with a lot of questions this week about the applications that we were reviewing, and they were very prompt and very thorough in their responses, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. Great job.
I agree. I just have a question, and I might have asked this before. The gentleman from TVCE brought up his emails in relation to a project of a subdivision in Hyampom. That landowner has spoken now 3 times, and then the TVCE representative today. How does that person, does the landowner or TVCE need to agendize that, or is that something that can be agendized from here? I guess I'm not sure on the procedure to get something on the agenda.
I think staff would have to agendize that, being that it's an application to planning.
You say the chair, so that you can agendize.
Yeah, you can.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. So with that application in particular, so it's originally a tentative parcel map that was undergoing modifications of conditions. And so the concern is that there's a specific period of time in which a map can be approved. And so the planning department took in an application for modification of conditions so that they could modify the conditions prior to the expiration of the map. But during the processing of the modification of conditions, the map expired. So now county staff are working internally to see if it is truly expired, if there's any leniency available, since there was an application for the modification. In working with county council, we're trying to explore different opportunities to work with the applicant. So we're still working on that, and we're trying to figure out any avenue to help the applicant move forward.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the answer. It's just he's been here a bunch, and it was brought up again today, and just seeing what we can do to help him out. But thank you for your answer.
Is there any other comments from the commissioners? Reports?
Well, I have one thing to share. Sometimes I'm a little, my internet is a little sketchy at the moment, and so I don't get to check my emails as much, even my personal stuff. It gets, sometimes goes a couple days without checking things because, but anyhow, I found out this last time that I guess I was, turned into somebody. There's a report of me to like the fair,
FPPC.
yeah, thank you. And those are the ones, and somebody, turned me in on something, but I guess I didn't, they didn't see there was enough, what would be the right wording for it, but it was like there wasn't enough evidence or whatever to, proceed with the, because I guess somebody unanimously put it out there that they didn't feel that I was being fair or whatever it was. And so I wanted to just let y'all know that it was like somebody turned me in. I don't know, couldn't tell that it was anonymous. And so just letting y'all know I was turned in, and it was like, I made it. So it's like, what's that?
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So it's like, not getting turned in. There you go. It's like, man. So I wanted y'all to know that.
Thanks for that, Todd. Is there any other commissioner reports? Okay. If nothing else, planning director, do you have something to report?
Unbelievably, I have a whole sheet of stuff.
All right.
About this time.
All right.
It's just going to be short though. It's not going to be a long time. So this is in response to the subdivision review committee, which I found to be very interesting that he did present, and you brought that up, and I think we need to prioritize that just so that we get some kind of an answer by the next meeting. So the question was subdivision review committee. So who needs to sit on the subdivision review committee? So that would be myself until we hire a director of planning, the public works director, which would be Panos Kokos. I don't know if you guys have met him. He's a very knowledgeable chap. The health officer, and I think that gets delegated as a designee down to the environmental health director. A representative from Trinity County Fire Chiefs Association is appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and that's to be determined. I thought that was a good one pick too. We need them on that. A planning commissioner as appointed by the planning commission. And the duly appointed planning commissioner shall serve as the chairman and the planning director as the secretary of the committee. The planning director shall also serve as chairman in absence of the duly appointed planning commissioner. And I even have duties here. It shall be the duty of the subdivision review committee to make recommendations upon all tentative maps and such other matters as presented to it by the commission and board of supervisors, and to take final action on all such requests as delegated to it by the advisory agency. The subdivision review committee shall hold regular meetings for their purpose. All such meetings shall be open to the public. So it's kind of a full-blown deal here.
Yeah. How often would they meet? Just didn't mean to interrupt. I was just asking.
It's a very good question, actually.
I believe it would be on an as-needed basis because we currently don't have enough like subdivision ordinance projects processing to necessitate like monthly meetings.
Thank you.
And it would require public notice in the paper and all that kind of stuff too?
Yes.
And would it just entail subdivisions, or would lot line adjustments, lot splits, other projects be part of, fall under this purview?
Lot line adjustments wouldn't be included, but I believe that modifications of conditions would be included, but I would have to follow up on whether or not extensions of time would be included. But I believe the function is supposed to be over the subdivision ordinance. And so theoretically it should be, or as the ordinance reads, I should say, it should be the subdivision review committee. And then if that project were to be appealed or to go to a higher body, then that would be the planning commission and then to the board. And so I believe that it's supposed to be that all projects that fall under the subdivision ordinance that need to go to an advisory agency should be going to the subdivision review committee, but because it's not meeting, it's coming here to the planning commission.
And at that committee, each representative would be giving their feedback. There's not necessarily voting upon consensus, but just an opportunity for each agency? Is that how it works?
They would be voting on the maps.
They would be voting on the maps?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Really? That doesn't seem right. Well, isn't it just a review? That's why they call it a review committee.
Microphone.
Sorry. Isn't it called a review committee because you're just reviewing?
So I've been working on a project that, I've been reviewing a project that started in 2011, and then the tentative map was passed in 2012, and it was passed by SRC resolution. So that was the first one that I ran into. But that's the only reason why I know for sure that they have passed resolutions to approve tentative maps.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when they pass the tentative map, then would it come to the, is that how that would work? Then it would come to here?
I don't think so.
Is that, or they would, that'd be in lieu of coming to here, it'd be taken care of in.
So I was just informed, remember, I'm administrative, so I do not have a background in these policies and procedures, but I was just informed that they would approve the tentative map, and then that tentative map, not taking away from the planning commission's time, then the tentative map would be reviewed and sent to the planning commission, so they would have a more complete, and I
That's kind of
do.
the way
Feedback from different agencies.
Streamline the process.
I can also research these questions and give a more thorough follow-up at the next planning commission meeting to make sure that everything's good.
And what we'll do is I'll get Skylar to find out exactly how many tentative parcel maps we do have out there. And then maybe present that next time, just in a short little, whatever, report out for you guys.
Thank you for researching it and giving us the information. So thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Fisher.
Okay, so next item is, so there's an appeal of an approved project. So this is in response to public comment. P-20-40 is going to need to return to the Planning Commission on August 25th, 2022 in response to comments submitted but not captured in the staff report packet presented to the Planning Commission when the project was initially approved. So we will need to have a Planning Commission meeting on the 25th of August to review. This was previously approved, but basically the comments were sent to the prior interim deputy director's email, and so they did not make it to the Planning Commission for review. So the item was heard, it was passed, but that person has since come forward and said that, you know, the documents that I presented should have been heard. And when I did the research, I went back and pulled the email out of the prior interim deputy director's email, and it was there previous to the Planning Commission meeting. So technically it should have been heard. So in our due diligence, going through county council, making sure that we're not setting ourselves up for failure in this aspect, it was recommended that we bring this back to the Planning Commission for review again. It was voted 5-0, but that shouldn't really have any bearing, but it will need to be presented again.
It was in the paper yesterday, the public notice.
It's in the Reservoir Road.
Yeah, Weaverville, right? Yeah.
Yep. And was it all the emails or just a percentage of emails that went to the wrong?
Well, it went to her personal email, and everything is supposed to go to info.planning.
Yeah.
And since it went to her personal email, the letter just wasn't included. And so, you know, and then she ended up resigning, and so it was just lost.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have even known had it not been brought to our attention. And basically, we want to make sure we're doing everything absolutely correct. We don't need to get missed. And I didn't want someone to essentially, I didn't want someone to come to the planning department and say, we presented this and it was there and it wasn't an email, but it wasn't heard and it's your fault. And so I ran it through the wickets, and so we're just going to have to rehear it. So sorry about that. I'm not trying to make extra work, but it was before my time. Okay, that was a mouthful. All right. The next one is amending the temporary occupancies ordinance in response to commissioner inquiry regarding director's use permits. Staff has performed research on the feasibility of updating Trinity County Code Section 17.30.080 temporary occupancies to make the temporary occupancies as construction support a building permit rather than a director's use permit. Is there interest of the planning commission to pursue this amendment?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I looked to Skylar because she's actually the one that wrote this, but since I'm sitting over here, I have to read it. And thanks again, Skylar. You do an awesome job. Okay, so then the last piece is hiring a new planner, and he starts on Monday. So this is just and it's going to be somebody over there to help alleviate the workload that Skylar feels on a daily basis. So what she wrote in on this one, because I'm once again reading her remarks, a new planner has accepted a job offer and will be joining the planning department. So that is definitely good news. Yes. And that's it. That's all I had.
Thank you for your report, Planning Director. That's it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I have one thought. One thought. I'm sorry. I received a letter from Debbie last week, I think it was, about somebody is talking about chickens or roosters in Weaverville.
You all received it.
Oh, we all received it?
We all did.
Oh, okay. It was like, I don't live in Weaverville. It was like, but, what's the issue going on with this thing? It was like,
Rooster.
it's a rooster. And is this something that we're not wanting to go down this route? Is that what it is? Is like, or is this something that we want to?
It can be agendized if you feel like it needs to be.
Because I'm not exactly sure the full details. I read the letter and it was like, I don't know, everything, but, do we want to deal with this thing?
Well, so there is a county ordinance that
Already dealt with it.
that allows you to have chickens in residential areas with no rooster.
With no rooster.
Yeah. And this particular property of concern, as far as I understand it, is rural residential.
It is.
And so on rural residential, you can have roosters. And so,
So what's the big deal?
The big deal is that roosters can be loud and it affects the neighbors. And so it's really, really affecting the well-being of neighbors that the rooster crows at all times of night and such. They've come before us and they're very concerned about it. And it's a big challenge because the zoning ordinance allows for livestock in rural residential.
And the rooster is in rural residential?
It is.
Well, then there's no issue. Never mind. Forget I brought it up. That takes care of it.
I have a motion to adjourn.
I make that a motion we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that.
We can bring it up in the general plan and that can be changed.
You are very entertaining.
Hey, I just want to bring up, and I want to ask